Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. I want to apologize in advance, guys. If you hate my vocal fry, you are really going to hate it today. I'm starting to get a little bit sick, and you know that part when it's like you're starting to get a cold and it's like your throat isn't hurting yet, but it's like scratchy all the time, and it like when you talk it's like dry and you're like that's where I'm at. But the show must go on, right? Gotta still record. So it sounds a little bit more like sandpaper than it usually does. So if that's something that already makes you irate, because I know it bugs a bunch of you guys, it's going to be worse today. So just want to give you guys a little bit of a, trigger warning. Now, today's case is one similar to things we've talked about in the past, right? It's like a tale as old as time. We're talking about somebody who seemed to have it all. She was stunning. She had 2 amazing kids. She had a husband with this great job. On the outside, everything looked picture perfect, glamorous for her. As we know, appearances can be very deceiving. And that is definitely what we are talking about in today's case. So guys, let's jump right in. In 2020, Maria Eugenia Muñoz was 31 years old. She had these super expressive eyes with long, thick lashes, freckles that covered her cheeks. She had a really tight-knit family growing up in Puerto Rico. Sadly, though, when Maria was a young adult, her mother passed away. And after her mom's death, Maria got to be even closer with her family, and she helped her father take care of her 2 siblings. Maria loved to help and take care of other people, which led to her becoming a nurse. She loved everything about her job. I mean, helping other people was her passion. And at work, she met Joel Pellot. Now, Joel was 11 years older than Maria. He had thick dark hair, bushy eyebrows, a muscular build. He was also in school at the time and working towards a career in medicine. Since they were both interested in the nursing industry and taking care of other people, Maria and Joel hit it off, and they ended up marrying each other in 2011. A few years later, Joel landed his dream job as a nurse anesthetist. Sorry, I have a really hard time saying that word, which is more commonly referred to as a CRNA. It's kind of like the nurse version of an anesthesiologist, and the job was exactly what Joel wanted, and the pay was absolutely amazing. The only problem was, it was in Texas, about 2,000 miles away from Puerto Rico. Maria and Joel had both grown up in Puerto Rico. That's where their family and their friends were. But when Joel got this job offer in Texas, Maria decided that she would support him. So she left behind her family, her career, everything. And she picked up and she moved to Laredo. Now, Laredo is generally considered a family-friendly city with a population of nearly 260,000 people. It's full of a bunch of lakes, parks, a bunch of different schools, making it an amazing place to live if you end up having children. But like any city, Laredo has its issues. I mean, crime rates, particularly when it came to property crimes, those rates were higher than the national average. But with that being said, there were still many other wonderful neighborhoods for Maria and Joel to live in that were pretty safe and almost never had any of those kinds of issues. It was a whole new world for Maria, but she was really excited to start this chapter of her life with Joel. She probably wouldn't have done it just for anybody else either, but she just loved him that much, and she didn't even think twice about this move. As if Maria and Joel weren't going through enough changes, though, with a new home, a new country, Maria also gave birth to her first son, Alejandro. Plus, when Maria moved to the States, she decided to put her nursing career on pause so that she could be a stay-at-home mom. It seemed like the best decision at the time for the family, and it also didn't hurt that Joel was making enough money for her to not have to work. So she actually really enjoyed staying at home with Alejandro and getting to have so much one-on-one time with him. She knew that she wanted more kids too, and a few years later in 2018, Maria and Joel had a second baby boy who they named Valentino. Maria loved being a boy mom. She was always taking them out to burn off their energy, whether that was heading to the playground, going for a walk, and then every night before bed, she would read them stories. She was just a very devoted mother by anybody's standards. She was always the one to tend to any single need that they ever had. If you walked into her house, you could just tell what kind of mom she was. Alejandro and Valentino's artwork was hung up all over the walls. Their toys were everywhere. It was just one of those places where it was like very warm and welcoming when you saw it. And it really spoke to Maria's love for her family, especially her boys. When she wasn't doing a lot of the parenting work, Maria was either playing piano, hanging out with friends, or taking care of the house. She stayed really busy, and Joel was having a lot of success at work. It showed off in more ways than one. I mean, he could afford to buy brand new expensive cars for both him and Maria. They took lots of extravagant vacations together. He loved to travel and post different selfies of him on all of his trips. He'd also buy Maria a lot of expensive things, high-end purses, kind of just lavish her with gifts. But by the fall of 2020, Joel was going through a really busy time at his work. Now, you would think that Maria would feel like she had to work extra hard to pick up the slack at home, but instead, she decided to start looking into taking some classes that she needed to become a registered nurse again, this time, though, of course, in the state of Texas. She was ready to get back into having a job. Her plan had been to stay at home while the boys were little, but now, once they were old enough to be in school, she's going to go back to work because she missed being a nurse. She missed her calling. She truly loved that job. She could never fully give it up. And Joel seemed to be in full agreement with this plan. He was known to get a bit bored at times with the suburban life that they had, though. I mean, 2 kids, a mortgage, all of the things. So that's one of the big reasons why he always wanted to get out and travel. In fact, sometimes he was so ready to change things up, he didn't even bring Maria and the kids with him on those trips. He did sometimes, but not always. But besides that, to most people, everything seemed pretty normal between Joel and Maria. Joel worked hard at the hospital, and Maria kept busy back at home with the boys. But in the early hours of September 22nd, 2020, at 1:30 a.m., it was different.
Alert 911, what's the address of emergency?
Hi, I called my wife on her responses, and kind of scared if she's not breathing.
Okay.
She may have taken some pills.
Okay, what is your address?
2203 Canyon Oak Drive.
And how?
78045.
Okay, so it's 203 Canyon Oak, correct?
Yeah.
And how old is your wife?
She's 32.
Okay. And you said that
I gave her some. I gave her some a bottle of pills, and when I checked it, there was only 2 in there.
Okay. Okay, sir. And do you know what kind of pills they were?
Yeah, clonazepam.
Okay. And do you know if she took those on purpose? Like, has she ever tried
she's been pretty depressed a little bit.
Okay.
We're going through some problems. Is somebody coming?
Yes, I'm sending them over. And can you check for a pulse, please?
Yeah.
Go ahead and check on the side of her neck to see if you feel any pulse.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm a little nervous, so I don't know if.
Okay, what about her chest? Is her chest rising up and down?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, and okay, can you try checking for a pulse again? You're gonna grab 2 fingers, your ring finger, your middle finger, and place it on.
No, yeah, I do this for a living, but
okay.
It's crazy because I'm just so nervous.
No, I know. I have them on the way. Okay, I have help on the way.
Okay.
If not, that way we can go ahead and start CPR on her.
And get her closer. Oh my goodness. Oh. Wait. Oh, man. Should I just wait on the phone, or?
Yes, I'll go ahead and wait on the line with you until they get there. They're already being dispatched out there. Do you feel a pulse?
Not really sure. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm going to put you on speaker.
Okay, yes, go ahead. Do you feel anything?
No.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and start CPR until the paramedics get there?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you need guidance or do you know how to perform CPR?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Are they coming?
9. Yes, they're on the way. Continue doing CPR. They're on the way, okay?
Okay. I feel something, but I don't know if it's my finger.
You think you feel a pulse?
I think I feel a pulse, but I don't know if it's my own finger. You know what I mean?
Okay. Are you checking on her wrist or on her neck?
Her neck.
Okay. And her chest isn't rising up and down still?
No.
Okay.
No.
When you're done with the cycle, have you checked in her mouth to see if you see any of the pills in there?
No.
Nothing's coming out of her mouth or anything?
No, nothing.
Okay, do you want to continue CPR?
Yeah.
Okay. There should already be an officer getting close.
An officer or an ambulance?
We have both an officer and an ambulance. Uh-huh.
Okay.
The ambulance is on its way as well. Is the door open or is it locked?
It's locked.
Okay.
Should I go open it?
Yes, I have some officers outside if you would be able to unlock the door really quick.
Come this way. I found her unresponsive on the bed, but I can't feel a pulse. Can you?
The ambulance is already on the way, okay? I'm going to let you go so you can speak with the officers. Hello, sir?
Yeah, I'm here. The officer's here. I'm
okay.
sorry.
I'm going to let you go so you can speak with them, okay? The ambulance is on its way.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Only one officer responded to the scene at first, and when he got there, Joel was still wearing his work scrubs, looking completely distraught, and Maria was just lying on the floor. He was giving CPR to Maria while Alejandro and Valentina were fast asleep in their beds, just luckily and completely oblivious to all of the chaos that was going on. But it was clear that whatever had happened, it had happened recently, because Maria was still conscious to some extent. Basically, she had a pulse, but that was it. So the responding officer had some hope that there was a chance that she could be revived. The officer asked Joel if he knew whether or not Maria took any pills, and if so, what she had taken. So Joel ran to the bathroom and brought back a bottle of clozapam, and the bottle had his name on the prescription. Now, clozapam is usually prescribed to manage seizures, panic disorders, and certain kinds of anxiety. It's really helpful for a lot of people. But it also can be very addictive if you don't follow the doctor's instructions and if you aren't careful with how you take it. So it was weird that Joel thought that Maria took the pills, being that they weren't even prescribed to her. I mean, she definitely could have taken them, but it was odd nonetheless. This is a very high-intense medication. But that made the officer think that maybe something was going on with Maria, something that would make her go and just take a bunch of pills at once that weren't hers. So the officers asked Joel what Maria's mental state was like recently. And sure enough, he had said that Maria had been pretty depressed lately. Although there was no sign that she was looking to end her life, she was just down a lot, but it was concerning nonetheless. Up until that point, the officer had been giving CPR, but eventually, Joel took back over until more help could arrive. By this time, Maria had lost all of the color from her face. Her heart wasn't beating, and her eyes were fully dilated, which in that situation, it typically means brain death. Now, the EMTs weren't ready to give up on Maria yet, but it was getting super crowded between Joel, the police, the medics, Maria herself. So they sent Joel downstairs because he was kind of just getting in the way. They wanted to focus all of their efforts onto helping Maria. They just needed space. But here's where it gets a little strange. At some point between performing CPR, the medics getting on the scene, and Howell heading downstairs, that bottle of pills vanished. It was nowhere to be found. It was like it was there 1 second and gone the next. When the police officer who had seen the pills earlier asked around, nobody seemed to even know what he was talking about. So he yelled downstairs to Howell asking him about the pills, and right away Howell came back up and threw the bottle at him. So the officer couldn't help but think like, okay, what the heck is going on here? His wife was literally dying and he was worried about hiding these pills? It was bizarre. Maybe Howell's own anxiety was kicking in, considering the pills were prescribed to him. Who knows? Maybe he thought he would somehow get blamed for Maria if she was overdosing. But still, it just didn't add up. He also was really quick to give over the pills when they asked about them, which is interesting to note. Like, he realized he wasn't going to be pulling a fast one over on this officer. Now, in the meantime, hours went by as the EMTs tried their absolute best to resuscitate Maria. But sadly, there was nothing that they could do to save her. She was pronounced dead just a couple of minutes before 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, Howell's weird behavior already had the detectives wondering if there was more to Maria's death than how, it just looked at the surface. Was this a straightforward overdose, or was there something maybe more sinister going on here? The first person they needed to talk to, of course, was Howell. They sat him down in the kitchen, hoping to piece together what Maria's final moments looked like, get some more information. And here's what's interesting. So first and foremost, something really important to note was that Howell was sweating a ton. I mean, yes, it was September in Texas, but even so, it was a ridiculous amount of sweat. He was also still wearing his scrubs, which are pretty lightweight, so it's not like he should have been super hot and sweaty because of the temperature. So was it the September heat getting to him, or were his nerves maybe getting out of control? It was hard to say, but strange nonetheless. The detectives asked Howell to walk them through his final moments with Maria that night. He said they had been intimate together, that afterwards he took a shower, and when he decided to go back upstairs after his shower, he found Maria passed out on the bed. And as he's describing this, he's getting very, very emotional. He said that he thought that she was just asleep at first, but when he got closer, he realized something was wrong. So he swept her up out of the bed into the hallway so that he could perform CPR. But guys, hear me out really quick too, because if Howell had just taken a shower, gone downstairs, why was he still in his scrubs when the police arrived? I mean, maybe he was naked when he found her, or just in a towel, and he pulled the closest clothing he could find. I don't know, and I could possibly be reaching here, but it seems a little bit weird to me. Another thing, he still had on his gold chain. So, was he showering with his chain on too? Did he sleep in it? Possibly, but there's something that just starts to feel a little weird for me. After Howell talked to the police about the last time he saw Maria, the detectives asked if they could search the house. They needed to check for anything suspicious, anything that might help them figure out if this was an overdose or if there was something more to the story. But here's where it also gets a little bit weird. Howell didn't want to let them. He said, "Well, I don't want you going through my stuff because I'm a very private man." Which, wouldn't you think that he would want answers about why his wife, the love of his life, was dead? But for some reason, he didn't want them looking around. I mean, he was just acting very mysterious. So finally, after a lot of back and forth with the police, Howell agreed to let them search the house. And sometime in all of this back and forth, Alejandro and Valentino woke up from all the commotion. They were taken into the police's custody until some of Maria and Howell's friends could take over. And the reason they had to take over is because Howell couldn't watch them himself, because while the police were going through the place and the house looking for clues, looking for everything, he was sent to the police station in the squad car to answer some more questions. And it ended up being a good call for them to insist on doing that search, because the detectives found some interesting things. I mean, we're talking syringes, IV equipment, a needle catheter, which was on the staircase, and a syringe wrapper on the floor. Now, I get that those are things that Howell would use at his daily job in the hospital, but why in the world would he have all of that stuff at home? Sure, some people bring their work home, but as a CRNA, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. You wouldn't even be allowed to take all of that out of the hospital. And get this, he also had a bone-dry shower, which he claimed he had just come out of the shower when he found Maria unresponsive. So there should have been water on the walls, on the bottom that hadn't dried yet, something like that. You guys know that if you have a family member or roommate or whoever you live with, that if you step into the shower even a few hours after somebody else uses it, it's usually still damp. So why wasn't it even the least bit wet when the detectives looked at it? The shampoo bottles weren't even wet. It was just another red flag in an already suspicious situation, right? So back at the station, he was waiting in the interrogation room, fully masked too because it was still 2020. But what really disturbed everybody was how loud and obviously upset he was. I don't mean that he was just crying over his wife's death. No, he was angrily pushing furniture around, making a huge scene. It was disruptive, it was odd, and kind of felt performative in a way. So when the detectives finally went in to talk to Joel, he asked what had really happened. But Joel didn't really seem to have any answers. He seemed very forgetful, which could have just been grief kicking in. It's hard to say.
Is it possible that she swallowed them all? How many pills were there before? Muscle metals. I really don't.
But when the detectives asked why there were syringes found at his house, he said he didn't know. Then, not long after, he changed his story. He said that he had used those syringes on himself because he was taking steroids, which, okay, sure, I mean, he was a pretty buff guy, but would he really leave that stuff lying around with Alejandro and Valentino being so young? I can't imagine that that would be the case. The detective asked Joel about another crucial piece of evidence that was found at the house. It was Maria's diary. And her diary painted a very different picture of their marriage from what all of their friends and family had seen. Because according to her diary, Joel had cheated on Maria back in 2018, right around the time their son Valentino was born, which, I gotta say, is a very gross timing. Not that there's ever a good time to cheat on your wife, but you get it. Apparently, it was like something flipped for Joel around that time. They used to have this pretty great marriage before that, and they were pretty happy right up until that time. I don't know if he didn't like that he wasn't getting as much attention from Maria as before the baby or what, but in any event, he met a woman named Janet while he was at work. She was a surgical nurse, and it didn't take long for their affair to start once they met. It stayed under the radar for a while, but Maria had a gut feeling that something was off for a really long time. However, with a toddler and a newborn, she tried to push those suspicions aside. But let me just say, it's not so surprising that Maria felt suspicious, because Joel was acting suspicious. Around that time, he started to delete Maria and the kids off of his social media accounts, making it look like he was some single bachelor who traveled the world and had all of this money, when in reality he had a wife and kids at home waiting for him. And eventually, Maria found out that there were plane tickets to Europe for not just him on a solo trip, not him and Maria, but him and Janet. She was absolutely devastated. Here she had 2 children and nearly 8 years of marriage with Joel. She was also living in a different country than her family, so she just felt hopeless and lost. At that point, she began taking antidepressants to ease her pain. She also began to journal and pray to God, just hoping to turn things around for herself and Joel. She poured her heart and soul into these journal entries too, and here's one entry that she wrote. My heart says one thing, my mind says something else. I am in this constant battle, tug-of-war. I want it to stop, but they won't. They keep me sad, and those are my tears. My future is foggy and unclear. My past haunts me. My present is confusing. Lord, hear my cry, see my tears, feel my pain. Bring me laughter, bring me peace, bring me happiness again. I don't want to be sad anymore. I don't want my heart to hurt. I don't want my mind to be in torture. Please, I beg you, Lord. Now, I don't know about you, but I have to say that was completely gut-wrenching to read. Maria was this heartbroken woman, but it was clear that she wanted things to change for her life and for her marriage. And during this time, she was all still acting so strong and so together for her children. The more that detectives went through Maria's diary, the more evident it was that Maria's personal life was in turmoil. A diary entry from just a couple of weeks before her death read, "So much pain, so much heartache that I have endured throughout these 2 years and nothing has changed. They keep getting worse. Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen. As time progresses, I lose sight of us reuniting as a family. My kids are already hurting, God. Please help me. I don't want to hurt anymore, Jesus. Please, I beg you. Make my situation change. I can't anymore, I swear." So Maria's diary laid it all out there. She knew about his double life. But what really stands out is how much her family meant to her. She even wrote a list of her biggest fears, and right at the top was losing my family. She talked about her sons in her diary, but when she talked about losing her family, she meant Joel too. She loved him so deeply. She went on and on about wanting her marriage to work out and just to go back to how it used to be. And let's not forget Maria's faith. I mean, her diaries are just filled with prayers to God, showing just how important her religious beliefs were to her. These two things, her devotion to her family and her faith, are key to understanding why she stayed. When I found out that she knew about his mistress, I wondered why she kept holding on. But Maria truly believed that God would restore her family and their nearly decade-long marriage. She hated how this whole situation was affecting her kids, and we know that her kids were her world. So with all of this in mind, it starts to make more sense why she stuck around. She was holding out for a miracle. So the detectives brought up the entire infidelity issue with Joel, and he admitted that yes, he had cheated on Maria, and he was still seeing Janet now, 2 years later. He never ended that relationship with her. In fact, they had been living together for 5 months. And according to Joel, Maria knew about it all. But she was hoping that things would turn around and they would get back together. And in fact, after Maria found out about the affair, they initially went on a trip together, and it seemed like the marriage was getting better. But then he went back to his old ways. He seemed to love having the control in the relationship and loving the fact that Maria never left. Even when she knew that he was cheating, she stayed. She held out hope, giving him the upper hand. Joel also told the officers that he and Maria had been intimate shortly before she died, which he made it sound like he and Maria were actually good together, and he didn't have any reason to want to hurt her or anything like that. But now his answers were bringing in a whole new possible suspect, Janet. Like I said, Janet was a nurse where he worked as well. She was really attractive with long dark hair, shiny hair, big dark brown eyes. When she first met Joel, she knew that he was married to Maria, but wanted to be in a relationship with him anyway, which, I gotta say, it's not good, girls. If you meet somebody who's in a relationship, wait until they're out. Not only for your own sake, but for the wife's sake as well. Just be a girl's girl, okay? So detectives brought Janet in to ask her some questions and see if maybe she was involved in Maria's mysterious death.
The reason that I'm here is because last night, Joel's wife passed away. There doesn't appear to be right now any type of foul play. We're still pending an autopsy. So let's get with, how did you and Joel even start dating?
I'm sorry.
I understand. Take your time. I know it's all kind of thrown at you, so, you know, I told you at the very beginning I'm going to be honest with you, so I am. Our main thing now is, obviously, is what happened.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
How long have you and Joel been dating?
Almost 2 years now.
Okay. Did Maria, his wife, did she do drugs?
Not that I'm aware of. He just told me that she was very depressed.
Okay.
When the detective asked Janet if she knew anything about the whole situation, she claimed that she didn't. She claimed that Joel didn't come to her mentioning anything about it. She knew that Maria was depressed because he had told her about that, but also I don't think that it would take a rocket scientist to figure out that Maria was depressed. I mean, who wouldn't be upset to find out that their spouse was not only cheating on them, but had this 2-year-long affair that was continuing to happen and now living with each other? They had even seriously talked about getting married. I guess neither one of them were thinking about Maria's feelings or the children's or going about things the right way, just not getting a divorce first, which I never know why people don't just get a freaking divorce instead of, stringing your wife around for years while you're having, your fun and you're gallivanting around. But here's the kicker in all of this. Janet was completely shocked when she found out about Maria. Just the fact that she was dead was absolutely mind-blowing to Janet. Janet didn't seem to have any ill will towards Maria and genuinely appeared to be sad about her death. Well, sad or maybe guilty, I don't know, because she had been sleeping with Maria's husband all this time and now Maria is no longer alive. Janet told the police that she didn't see Joel on the night of Maria's death. He had said that he had picked up an extra shift at work and he wasn't going to be able to see her that night, which was apparently pretty normal for him because in the medical world that was somewhat common for him to do, which Janet completely understood since she was in the medical world as well. So after the questioning, Janet was free to go at that point. From there, the police started reaching out to some of Maria's friends to get an idea of what was going on in the days leading up to her death. One of her friends mentioned that something big had happened just a few days before she died. The Saturday before, Maria was driving by Janet's house and she saw Joel's car parked out front. Now, I'm not sure if she was purposely doing a drive-by or just happened to be in the neighborhood, but either way, she stopped the car and went up to the door. When Howell answered, she gave him an ultimatum. He had to choose her or Janet, and the asshole picked Janet. But for whatever reason, Howell did end up leaving with Maria. Janet had already called the police to the scene before they left, but they didn't arrive until afterward. And that kind of makes you wonder why Janet was getting the police involved in all of this. Maria just wanted answers. She wasn't being belligerent or threatening, so I don't know why Janet called the police on her. When the police did get to Janet's house, they called Maria basically to make sure that everything was okay and that the issue had been resolved and that they didn't need to intervene. They called Maria, and they put her on speakerphone right there with Janet standing there.
Hey, I'm talking to you right now. Head up the phone.
I guess that's your boyfriend.
Yeah. After the call, Howell apparently became pretty frustrated and began acting out with Maria. He even punched a hole through the windshield of the car. And this wasn't the first time that he acted angry and, controlling and off the rails around her. One time Maria recorded a video without Howell knowing while they were in the car. She said, "If you walk out of this car, we are over." And he reacted, just started swearing, yelling "done," and then he left. So that following morning, after the whole fallout at Janet's house, Howell was out of the house. I'm not sure where, either at work or maybe back at Janet's, and Maria messaged him saying that they should get a divorce lawyer, and they should basically end things. He seemed to be in agreement about the marriage being over. However, the paying of the lawyer part, not so much. He messaged her back saying, "We can do this with minimal lawyer intervention. It's too much money." But by early Monday morning around 1 a.m., he messaged Maria again, and this time in an email seemingly wanting to fix things. He wrote, "I'm so sad. I'm hurting inside." His email was pretty lengthy, but it ended with him saying he wanted to have a heart-to-heart with Maria. Which I don't know about you, but that all seems pretty manipulative to me. Maria had been begging him to come to his senses, but he chose Janet time and time again. So now, all of a sudden, he wants to have a heart-to-heart and meet later that Monday evening with Maria? What made him completely turn around like that? Either way, though, Maria seemed open to the meeting. She sent a Facebook message to one of her friends asking for prayers and for God's will to be done during the conversation with him. But then just a few hours after that meeting, she was dead of an apparent overdose. Again, the timing and everything else is just too weird to ignore. Maria's funeral was held at the First Baptist Church of Laredo. Her family and friends gathered to mourn her loss, and Howell was there too. He seemed visibly shaken, crying from start to finish. At one point, he even went up to Maria in her casket, just crying over her, kissing her face. Despite everything that had happened, he appeared to be grieving just like any other heartbroken husband would. But the police were getting more and more suspicious of him. They knew that an autopsy had been done, and they were waiting for those results to come back. When they did, the medical examiner said that there wasn't any residue from any pills in her system. But Howell had said that she took the pills. He even had the bottle to prove it. Remember, he showed it to the first responders when they were trying to revive her. But as we know, an autopsy doesn't lie. And something else that was really bizarre showed up on this report, a little reddish-purple mark on her arm. Right on a vein. You know, the kind of mark that you would get if you were to have blood taken? But Maria didn't have any recent doctor's appointments where she would have needed to get a needle or a jab or get blood work done. On top of that, Maria also didn't have any alcohol or marijuana in her system when she died either. There were some other symptoms that made it clear that Maria had died of an overdose, but that she hadn't died because of something that she had swallowed like a pill. It seemed like, based on that mark on her arm, she might have injected something. Her cause of death was ruled to be intoxication by a combination of drugs. But the million-dollar question was, did she inject herself or no? Now, lots of people were wondering exactly that, and whenever Howell's boss heard about Maria's autopsy reports, alarms instantly started going off in his mind. Being an anesthesiologist, he found the whole situation with Maria having a prick on her arm and a mix of drugs in her system really strange, especially since the drugs in her system were not something that you could get at any old pharmacy. Now, add in the fact that Maria was married to someone in that line of work who dealt with those kinds of drugs on a daily basis. So he told the police department that a more thorough toxicology report should be done. This could determine whether or not the drugs in her system were ones that Howell had access to at the hospital. So the police granted this report. It took months to come back, but when it did, here is what they found: morphine, Demerol, Versed, Propofol, ketamine, lidocaine, and Narcan. Now, if you're familiar with these drugs, you know that these are not your typical medications. Morphine and Demerol are both very powerful painkillers. Versed, also known as midazolam, is a very strong sedative that is used for anesthesia. Propofol is a strong anesthetic and not something that you would just take recreationally. Ketamine is an anesthetic that sometimes can be used for pain relief, but also is something that will hugely make you hallucinate. And lidocaine is a local anesthetic. And as most of you guys probably know, Narcan is used to reverse opioid overdoses. Now, the kicker in all of this, there was no trace of that clozapam, the drug that Howell claimed Maria had taken. And these specific drugs, especially the Propofol, tend to be injected, which fit with what the medical examiner had seen with that small puncture mark on Maria's arm in a typical injection site. And the fact that her husband injected people on a daily basis due to the nature of his job, not looking good. I mean, yes, Maria was a nurse, so she knew how to inject needles, but since she wasn't practicing nursing at the time, she didn't have access to all those drugs. The police's theory by this point was that Howell had managed to sneak a sedative into one of Maria's drinks that night that she died, which would have had to have been in liquid form. Then, once she was unconscious from that drug, he used an IV to inject her with something strong enough to kill her. He waited until she was too far gone, and then he called 911. Now, you have to remember, if the theory was true, this was his job. He knew exactly how much to give and how long to wait until she was at the point of no return. And it all makes sense. I mean, if they were planning on meeting up for this big talk, it would have been the perfect opportunity for him to offer Maria a warm cup of coffee or a drink, something before they began their conversation. She wouldn't think twice about it. So after the tox report came out, that was basically the smoking gun that police needed to make their arrest. Howell was officially arrested in January of 2021. He was with friends when the police found him, and he surrendered peacefully. The charges were Maria's murder and tampering with evidence, and his bail was set at $200,000. The news was very shocking, especially to Maria's family. The police hadn't really been advertising the fact that they were investigating Maria's death as a homicide, so up until that day, her sister Marisol still thought that Maria might have taken her own life. She never imagined that her own husband could be a suspect. She knew he didn't treat Maria great, but killing her? Not possible. Marisol spoke to the media after Howell's arrest, saying, "I did not think that he was guilty or that he had done it, but I thought because of him and their situation that it led to her to take her own life. He made her suffer in person, a lot. It was 2 years of marital troubles, but at the same time, he would not let her go. Because when she would try, he would come and tell her that he loved her, that he could bring back the passion. He manipulated her. She would confide in me, 'I can't leave him because he loves me.'" Marisol still lived in Puerto Rico, so before her death, Maria would often write letters to her, and in them she would complain about her marriage. According to Marisol, sometimes Maria would mention Howell wanting to work things out, but as time went on, especially in the lead up to Maria's death, she ended up asking Marisol to buy her a ticket to Puerto Rico. And this kind of confirms for me at this point, at least, that Maria didn't want to end her life. She was looking for a fresh start. She likely wanted to go back to Puerto Rico and raise her boys there around family who could be there and support her. Marisol also talked about how one day before Maria died, she had contacted a divorce lawyer due to a fight that they had had, which, as we know, it must have been the fight that happened when Maria found Howell at Janet's house over the weekend. I feel like that was probably the breaking point for Maria and what made her finally tip the scale towards ending the marriage. Something else interesting that Marisol shared with the media was that after Maria died, Howell was really pushing for her to be cremated. But before that could happen, the autopsy had to be done. So I'm wondering if he was hoping that if they cremated her soon enough, that a tox report could never be done. After Howell was arrested, police circled back to Janet to see if she knew more than she was letting on. She went back to the station with her lawyers and said that the day after she spoke with the police for the very first time, Howell had asked her to delete the surveillance footage from her security cameras the night of September 21st and September 22nd. That's the day before and the day of Maria's death. Now, I have no idea what was on those cameras and why he wanted that footage deleted. All I can think of is that he didn't want any sort of record of where exactly he was around the time of the murder, or maybe he was coming and going, carrying supplies that he later used on Maria. It's hard to say since the footage was, yes, deleted. Janet did what she was asked. She also said that Howell brought drugs to her house from the hospital, including Proferol, morphine, and all of the others, and that they would sometimes use them together, recreationally. Sometimes they would inject the IV themselves, and sometimes they'd give it to each other, which is horrible and gross and so reckless, especially since they are in the medical field and they are trusted medical professionals. But here's where things get even more interesting. Janet admitted that Howell told her that he had injected Maria with something, but he said that it was because she was out of sorts, acting erratically, so he wanted to help calm her down. He also confessed that he pulled the IV catheter out of Maria's arm before the police got to his house that night. It's unclear whether or not Janet believed all of that, or if that was just the story that she was telling the police so that she wouldn't be blamed for anything regarding the situation. Maybe if she was lying to cover her own butt, but it worked, because with all that information that Janet was giving the police, they made a deal with her. She would get immunity if she testified against Howell at his trial. And she agreed to this deal, which was probably one of the smartest decisions that Janet ever made in her life. Shockingly enough, Howell was able to make his bail, and he didn't have to stay in jail. Instead, he was given an ankle monitor to wear until his trial, which didn't happen for a couple of years. And it kind of just goes to show how much money he was making that he could afford that bail. But finally, he went to trial 2 years later on March 20th, 2023. And let me tell you, it was intense. The prosecution came out swinging, saying that Howell had been having an affair for years and that he just wanted out of his marriage. They said that he saw no other way out but to kill Maria. However, the defense had a completely different story. They said that both Maria and Howell were drug abusers, that the two of them both agreed to use drugs that night together. They were both doing them and enjoying doing so. Then, according to the defense team, Maria had an overdose, and that prick on Maria's arm was from Howell trying to save her with Narcan. They insisted he was not a murderer, but a husband who was desperately trying to revive his wife from a drug overdose. So after they made their arguments, it was up to the jury to decide between the two drastically different narratives. The jury got to hear some pretty compelling evidence, including excerpts from Maria's diary, especially those entries from around the time of her death, and the jury was also shown body cam footage of Howell giving Maria CPR. And here's where it gets interesting. When this footage played in the courtroom, Howell started to cry. And it was very out of character for him because up until that point, he had shown zero emotion about this case in the public eye. So much so, it was like the past 3 years he hadn't shown any emotion. And I should also note here that he didn't speak during the trial either. One of Howell's co-workers, Luis, took the stand, and Luis was one of his friends at work. He testified that Howell had talked to him about his marriage troubles, and according to Luis, Howell described his marriage as a, quote, hard situation, and he didn't want to get a divorce because he thought it would be too much of a burden if he had to pay child support. Which I gotta say, it's kind of crazy that he felt that way because he was well off, he was loaded. I mean, he wasn't hurting for money. And when he was still working as a CRNA, he was collecting regular paychecks. Luis even said that at one point after Maria died, he asked Howell point blank if he killed her. And Howell responded saying, I can't talk about it. It's a simple yes or no, and the answer should be no, right? What do you mean you can't talk about it? So on the last day of trial, Howell's mom, Miriam, took the stand defending her son. She had sort of acted as his personal assistant while he was in jail too. He would call her asking for money to pay some old bills for medication he needed, and if it's not obvious from the fact that she was helping him, Miriam said that he was innocent. She said that she knew about the affair and that she had urged Maria and Howell to work on fixing their relationship 2 years before she died. But she just did not believe that he was capable of killing his own wife. This was in spite of the fact that he had asked her to delete Maria's Facebook account and a post that he had on his account which was negative about Maria. I feel like with Miriam, she was kind of blinded by her love for her son. She didn't want to believe what was going on even though the facts were kind of hitting her right in the face. So finally, after 8 days of testimony, the jury needed less than 2 hours to deliberate. He was found guilty of the murder and he was sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict, Maria's family spoke with the news.
My world had stopped completely. I felt that I had died with her as well. It was really hard to get over for these 2 years and 6 months.
We want them to know that we were grieving, we are in pain, we're still in pain, and that we understand that they're gonna be going through a process now of what's happening with their son.
Today, Joel is serving his life sentence at Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I couldn't find any updates on what became of Alejandro and Valentino, but hopefully they're getting all of the love and support that they need from their family and from Maria's loved ones during this time. I also couldn't find any sort of update regarding Janet, except the fact that she and Joel are no longer together. So I'm curious to know what she's up to today and if she still works as a nurse, which would be a terrifying thought considering her abuse of medication, but I don't know what's going on with her. I am curious to know what you guys think of this case, though. Do you think that justice was served? And I'm wondering what you think about Janet's role in all of this. It doesn't seem like she actually killed Maria or did much of anything the night of her death, but she did hide a lot of evidence from the police until she was basically backed into a corner. I did see an interesting theory that talked about the possibility of Joel slipping stuff into Maria's drinks for a period of time, which would have kind of put her in this state of psychological torture. It seems like he did have a lot of different types of drugs from the hospital on him at all times, so there could be something to that theory. But I think a big part of it was that he liked being in control. He liked that he had all of the power in his marriage and that he was able to do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. I think that he loved that Maria wanted him back and that she continued to basically beg for him to change his mind, even though he continued to choose Janet time and time again. But let me know what you guys think about this case. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that he really is innocent, as a lot of people think? Or do you think he did this and he just didn't want to deal with the divorce and paying for child support? What are the motives? What are the reasons? Who is the killer? Or was this accidental? Let me know what you guys think below. Thanks again, and until the next one, please, please, please stay safe. Bye.